President Yoweri Museveni has warned other countries not to meddle in Uganda's affairs. Speaking at a press conference on Sunday, Museveni accused some unnamed foreign countries of seeking to influence the nation's politics by funneling assistance to the opposition through non-governmental organizations. The Ugandan leader also announced that thousands of auxiliary forces will be deployed in the capital Kampala to boost security. Tensions heightened in the country in August following the detention and reported torture of lawmaker Bobi Wine. Last week, the opposition called for the United States to suspend military aid to Uganda over the government's humanitarian rights record.
It is important that external players refrain from interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. Interfering in the internal affairs of other countries is morally and practically wrong. Morally wrong because the question is, what superior intelligence do you have to think that you can understand the problem in my house better than we, the occupants? If there is a problem in our house, we, the occupants, will solve it. Keep out.
Isabel Nakire joins me from Kampala with a recap of yesterday's speech by President Museveni. Isabel, the big elephant in the room is certainly Bobi Wine's arrest and subsequent release. What did the president have to say about political tensions we saw unfold in recent weeks?
Thank you. I think the president mentioned the opposition politicians, of course, referring to the recent protests that have been taking place in the country since the Arua by-elections that led to the alleged torture and, of course, the arrest of some MPs. He did mention that many politicians, especially the opposition, were indisciplined, and he thinks that foreign funders are using the opposition to fund some missions that they are doing in the country. He mentioned some NGOs that are being used. He didn't mention particular NGOs, but he said that foreign money is coming through these NGOs and funding goes to the opposition. And they are using the unemployed youth that he says are being given some money to burn tires around the protests, and also they were allegedly going to burn up petrol stations, but he said that his government stopped that. He also mentioned that he is he's going to deploy over 24,000 local defense units to curb these insecurities, including the murders and, of course, the opposition politicians that he claims are indisciplined. He also mentioned the use of funding of youth groups that are unemployed. He says because they are unemployed, they are being used by the opposition politicians to create chaos in the country and cause insecurity. So he's putting some funding into some skills training and, of course, giving some capital to some of these youth to open up vocational projects that they can use to kind of come up with some employment for themselves instead of being caught up in opposition politician campaigns.
And Isabel, there were reports of government officials being stoned at the funeral of a high-profile policeman who was gunned down a few days ago. Talk to us more about that.
Of course, the gunning down of a prominent police officer comes about 3 months since another politician, an NRM politician, was gunned down and killed. And so there is a lot of fear, and people are scared of their lives, and they think that the government is not offering enough security for them. So during the funeral, some of the speakers at the funeral did say that the government is not offering security for them, and therefore they do not want to see any government officials coming up to the funeral to offer condolences or anything of that kind. And so when the Internal Affairs Minister came, he was, of course, reluctantly allowed to come into the gathering where the funeral was taking place. But after a few minutes, bottles and food and stones started flying. And so he had to be taken away to protect him from any kind of injuries. And the police, of course, were also trying to make sure that they restrained themselves from maybe firing bullets or tear gas canisters at the funeral. But then they got more angered when the police spokesperson Emilia and Kaima appeared at the funeral. They think that the police are not offering enough security. The police officer who was killed had previously talked about his life being under threat, and he claimed that some people were following him on borders or motorcycles that were not numbered, had number plates on them. And he did take a case to one of the police stations, file a case and say that his life was under threat. But we understand that he was not given security. And so people are angered, people are upset, and they think that the security of their lives is still under threat.
All right, Isabel, thank you very much for that. Isabel Nakiria, live in Kampala.